October 24th, 1942. The rain had finally stopped over Guadalcanal, but the jungle still dripped from every branch. The silence unsettled everyone. Veterans had learned that on Guadalcanal, quiet mornings usually ended in bloody afternoons. Private conversations were whispered. Weapons were checked for the 10th time. Every Marine knew the Japanese were coming. They just didn't know when, or from where. Along a narrow jungle ridge defended by the 7th Marine Regiment, one machine gun section prepared for another exhausting day. Its leader, John Basilone, moved calmly from position to position. Unlike many officers and senior non-commissioned officers, Basilone rarely gave long speeches. He preferred short instructions. Keep your ammunition dry. Know where your spare barrel is. Don't waste rounds. The Marines nodded. Most had already heard those words dozens of times. What they didn't know was that within hours those simple instructions would decide who lived and who died. Across the jungle, nearly 3,000 soldiers from the Imperial Japanese Army quietly assembled. Their mission appeared straightforward: break through the American line, capture the airfield, destroy the Marines. Japanese commanders believed American resistance was weakening. Food shortages, disease, constant shelling. Surely the defenders were exhausted. In one respect, they were right. Nearly every Marine on Guadalcanal was exhausted. Many had malaria, others suffered from dysentery. Most survived on reduced food rations. Sleep had become a luxury, yet exhaustion didn't mean surrender. Far from it. As darkness approached, Basilone personally inspected every machine gun under his responsibility. The heavy M1917 Browning machine gun was an extraordinarily reliable weapon, but reliability depended on preparation. Water jackets had to remain filled. Belts of ammunition had to be protected from mud. Spare parts had to remain close. A machine gun without ammunition became useless. A machine gun without cooling water eventually destroyed itself. Basilone understood every detail. He had become almost obsessive about maintenance. Some younger Marines quietly joked that he treated his weapons better than most men treated their own families. He didn't mind. He had seen what happened when equipment failed during combat. Sunset arrived. The jungle disappeared into darkness almost immediately. There were no city lights. No moonlit roads. Only dense black forest. Somewhere beyond those trees, thousands of Japanese soldiers began moving. Slowly, silently, American listening posts soon detected unusual sounds: branches breaking, equipment shifting, muted voices carried by the humid air. The reports traveled quickly through the defensive line. Movement in front, then another report. Multiple groups, then another. They're getting closer. Every Marine quietly took his position. No shouting, no panic. Everyone understood what was coming. The first flare suddenly illuminated the jungle. For several seconds, the entire battlefield turned bright white. Then, the Americans saw them. Rows of Japanese infantry advancing between the trees. Not running, walking, disciplined. Determined. Someone yelled, "Here they come." Machine guns erupted simultaneously. Orange flashes ripped through the darkness. Tracer rounds streaked across the jungle. The first wave stumbled. Some soldiers fell immediately. Others kept advancing without hesitation. Mortars exploded behind the Marine positions. Tree branches crashed downward. Mud flew through the air. Within minutes, the entire ridge had become a wall of fire. Basilone moved continuously. One gun jammed. He cleared it. Another crew lost its gunner. He replaced him. A third position reported low ammunition. Basilone personally carried fresh belts under enemy fire. Several Marines later admitted they stopped trying to follow his movements. He seemed to appear wherever the fighting became worst. Then disaster struck. One machine gun fell completely silent. Its entire crew had been hit. Japanese infantry immediately shifted toward the gap. Basilone sprinted across open ground. Bullets snapped past him. Mortar fragments tore through nearby trees. Without hesitation, he threw himself behind the abandoned gun. He checked the receiver, loaded another ammunition belt, pulled the charging handle. The Browning roared back to life. The advancing Japanese formation suddenly collapsed beneath the stream of .30 caliber fire. The attack stalled, only temporarily. The Japanese regrouped almost immediately. They attacked again, and again. Each assault grew stronger. Each came closer than the last. Hours passed. The battlefield became almost impossible to recognize. Broken trees, destroyed bunkers, empty ammunition boxes scattered everywhere. Bodies lay across the jungle floor. Smoke mixed with the heavy tropical humidity. Communication lines repeatedly failed as shells severed telephone cables. Runners replaced radios. Messages took longer to arrive. Confusion spread. Then another crisis. Basilone's machine gun finally ran dry. Not because of malfunction, because they had fired nearly every belt available. The nearest ammunition dump lay hundreds of yards behind the line. Between them, Japanese soldiers had already penetrated several sections of the perimeter. Most men would have waited, requested volunteers, asked for reinforcements. Basilone did neither. He grabbed empty ammunition carts, looked toward the darkness behind him, then simply said, "I'll get it." Several Marines protested. "You'll never make it." He ignored them, disappearing into the darkness. He began running straight through a battlefield where neither side completely controlled the ground. Somewhere ahead, Japanese patrols were already moving between shattered defensive positions. And before dawn, he would come face to face with them in the jungle. October 25, 1942. The jungle was no longer quiet. For hours, the thunder of machine guns, mortars, rifles, and artillery had shaken the dense forests of Guadalcanal. Sergeant John Basilone knew his machine gun positions had only minutes of ammunition left. If those guns stopped firing, the Japanese would pour through the gap. Entire companies could be surrounded before sunrise. He tightened the sling on his rifle and disappeared into the darkness. Behind him, several Marines watched in disbelief. One corporal quietly muttered, "He's dead." Another answered, "Not yet." Basilone moved without using a flashlight. Even the smallest beam of light would have revealed his position instantly. Instead, he relied on memory. He had walked those jungle trails dozens of times during daylight. Now he retraced them in complete darkness, guided only by instinct. The smell of wet earth mixed with gunpowder. Tree trunks still smoked from recent mortar explosions. Every few yards he stopped completely. Not because he was afraid, because he was listening. In the Pacific, survival often depended more on hearing than seeing. The jungle spoke. Branches breaking, equipment brushing against leaves. Whispered commands in Japanese. A careless footstep. Every sound mattered. Then, voices, very close. Japanese. Basilone slowly lowered himself into the mud. Less than 20 yards away, several enemy soldiers cautiously crossed the trail, bayonets fixed, rifles ready. They were searching for gaps in the Marine line. One soldier stopped only a few feet from where Basilone lay hidden beneath tangled roots. For nearly 30 seconds, neither man moved. A mosquito landed on Basilone's cheek. He ignored it. Sweat ran into his eyes. Still, he remained absolutely motionless. Finally, the patrol continued forward. Only after their footsteps disappeared did Basilone stand again. The ammunition dump finally appeared through the darkness. Several Marines guarding it stared in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "We're almost dry." The guards pointed toward stacks of ammunition belts. Normally, several men transported those heavy loads. Basilone didn't wait. He grabbed as many belts as he could carry, draped others around his shoulders, wrapped more across his chest. The weight was enormous, but leaving half behind wasn't an option. Every belt meant another burst of machine gun fire, another chance for the line to hold. The return journey proved even more dangerous. Japanese infiltrators had pushed deeper into the American perimeter. The battlefield no longer had a clear front line. Friend and enemy often occupied the same patches of jungle without realizing it. Halfway back, a voice suddenly shouted, "Japanese!" Someone had seen movement. Rifle shots cracked through the trees. Bullets struck branches overhead. Basilone threw himself behind a fallen log. Wood splinters exploded around him. He waited. The firing stopped. The Japanese assumed they had driven off whoever they had spotted. Instead, Basilone crawled through thick mud until he reached another trail, then circled around them. Minutes later, he emerged inside the Marine perimeter carrying enough ammunition to keep multiple guns firing. The machine gun crews erupted in relief. "You actually made it," Basilone answered with only 2 words. "Load it." Within seconds, the Browning machine guns roared back to life. Their steady rhythm echoed across the jungle. The Japanese assault hesitated once again. For nearly another hour, wave after wave attacked the Marine positions. Some enemy soldiers came so close that grenades replaced rifle fire. Others attempted to crawl beneath fallen trees. Every opening became another avenue of attack. One machine gun suddenly fell silent again. This time, not from lack of ammunition. Its crew had become casualties. Without hesitation, Basilone sprinted toward the position. The Japanese noticed immediately. Machine gun fire ripped across the clearing. Several Marines shouted for him to get down. He ignored them. Reaching the abandoned Browning, he discovered the assistant gunner still alive but badly wounded. Together they dragged the weapon slightly sideways, creating a new field of fire. Then Basilone opened fire. The heavy machine gun hammered continuously. Japanese soldiers who believed they had finally broken through suddenly found themselves trapped in devastating crossfire. The attack collapsed once more. But the night wasn't over. Far from it. Around midnight, enemy mortar fire intensified. Explosions walked steadily along the Marine line. One blast destroyed part of a communications trench. Another buried several ammunition boxes beneath collapsed earth. Fragments tore through nearby trees. A jagged piece of shrapnel struck Basilone across the side of his helmet. The impact knocked him sideways. For a moment, everything went silent. One Marine crawled toward him. "Gunny?" No answer. Then Basilone slowly pushed himself back up. Blood trickled down the side of his face. His helmet had absorbed most of the impact. Without it, the wound would almost certainly have been fatal. He wiped the blood away, checked the machine gun, and continued firing. The Marines watching him later admitted something remarkable. His calmness spread through the entire defensive line. Whenever Basilone appeared at a position, panic disappeared. Men who had nearly abandoned their foxholes resumed firing. Machine gun crews regained confidence. Even exhausted Marines who had fought for hours somehow found enough strength to continue. Leadership, they realized later, wasn't always shouting orders. Sometimes, it was simply refusing to quit. The Japanese launched one of their largest assaults shortly before dawn. Hundreds of voices suddenly erupted from the darkness. Bugles sounded. Officers shouted commands. The attack came directly toward Basilone's sector. Machine guns fired until barrels glowed. Riflemen emptied magazine after magazine. Mortars exploded almost continuously. Still, the Japanese kept coming. Several enemy soldiers reached the barbed wire itself. Hand grenades exploded inside the Marine perimeter. Close-range firefights erupted between foxholes. For several terrifying minutes, no one knew whether the line would survive. Then Basilone noticed something critical. One section of the defense had stopped firing altogether. If that gap remained open, the entire Japanese assault could roll through the center of the Marine position. He grabbed another machine gun, lifted its heavy tripod, and, together with another Marine, dragged it through exploding mortar rounds toward the silent sector. Neither man knew whether they would arrive alive. They only knew they had to get there, because if they didn't, morning might reveal an American airfield flying a Japanese flag. The eastern sky was beginning to turn gray. For nearly 8 hours, the Marines defending Guadalcanal had endured almost continuous attacks. Many had not eaten since the previous day. Most had fired thousands of rounds. Several machine gun positions had been destroyed and rebuilt more than once during the night. Still, the Japanese kept coming. Sergeant John Basilone reached the silent section of the defensive line just as another assault emerged from the jungle. The scene before him was devastating. 2 machine gun crews had been wiped out. The trenches were shattered. Telephone wires hung from broken trees. Boxes of ammunition lay scattered across the mud. The surviving Marines looked exhausted. Some clutched nearly empty rifles. Others searched desperately for more ammunition. Everyone understood the situation. If this position fell, the Japanese could split the American defenses in 2. Basilone didn't waste a second. He dropped beside one abandoned M1917 Browning machine gun. Quickly inspecting the weapon, he realized the problem wasn't mechanical. The gun still worked perfectly. Its crew no longer could. He loaded a fresh ammunition belt, checked the water jacket, pulled back the charging handle. The Browning came alive once more. Its steady roar echoed through the trees. The leading wave of Japanese infantry immediately slowed. Some threw themselves behind fallen logs. Others continued advancing despite the deadly stream of fire. The attack had lost its momentum, but only for a moment. Japanese officers quickly reorganized their men. Bugles sounded again. Another assault formed, this one larger than the last. Mortar rounds crashed around Basilone's position. Mud showered over the machine gun. Fragments tore through nearby branches. One explosion buried part of the ammunition belt beneath loose earth. Without hesitation, Basilone cleared the obstruction and kept firing. The Marines around him later remembered something extraordinary. He never appeared hurried. Even during the most violent moments, every movement remained deliberate. He changed barrels when necessary, adjusted his aim calmly, conserved ammunition whenever the enemy temporarily disappeared. Years of training had become instinct. The battle turned into a brutal contest of endurance. The Japanese attacked. The Marines held. Again and again. Each assault seemed determined to overwhelm the defenders through sheer persistence. Yet every time they reached the wire, the machine guns forced them back. As daylight slowly increased, American artillery observers finally gained a better view of the battlefield. Coordinates began reaching artillery batteries farther behind the lines. Moments later, the jungle erupted. Heavy shells screamed overhead before crashing into Japanese assembly areas. Towering columns of dirt and shattered trees rose into the humid morning air. For the first time all night, the attackers hesitated. The Marines immediately seized the opportunity. Rifle fire intensified. Machine guns swept every likely avenue of approach. The Japanese advance slowed dramatically, then stopped. Silence gradually replaced the chaos. Not complete silence. Wounded men still cried for medics. Occasional rifle shots echoed through the forest. Burning vegetation crackled softly. Compared with the previous 8 hours, it felt almost peaceful. Basilone finally leaned back from the machine gun. His uniform was soaked with sweat, mud, and powder residue. Only then did another Marine notice blood running along the side of his face. "You're hit." Basilone reached toward his helmet. His fingers came away red. The fragment that had struck him hours earlier had opened a deep cut across his scalp. He shrugged. It can wait. For him, the battle wasn't finished until every position had been checked. He spent the next several hours walking the defensive line, helping evacuate wounded Marines, redistributing ammunition, inspecting damaged machine guns, encouraging exhausted men who had barely remained awake through the night. Only after every position reported secure did he finally allow a Navy corpsman to examine his injuries. The results of the battle gradually became clear. The Japanese offensive had failed. Hundreds of attackers lay before the Marine lines. Others had retreated into the jungle after suffering devastating losses. The American defense had held, and one of the decisive reasons was the refusal of a handful of Marines led by Basilone to abandon their machine gun positions despite overwhelming pressure. For his actions during those desperate hours, John Basilone would later receive the Medal of Honor, America's highest award for valor. The official citation described how he repeatedly repaired machine guns under fire, redistributed ammunition, crossed dangerous ground despite enemy attacks, and personally kept multiple defensive positions operational when their original crews became casualties. None of those achievements were exaggerated. If anything, the men who fought beside him often believed the official citation understated what had happened. Many later admitted they had expected the Japanese breakthrough to succeed, not because the Marines lacked courage, because the odds were overwhelming. Yet discipline repeatedly defeated numbers. The battle also demonstrated something historians still emphasize today. Weapons alone never win battles. The M1917 Browning was an outstanding machine gun, but without trained crews, it was only steel. Without ammunition, it became useless. Without leadership, even the finest weapon could not hold a defensive line. Basilone combined all three: skill, preparation, leadership. Those qualities inspired everyone around him. After Guadalcanal, Basilone became famous throughout the United States. Newspapers wanted interviews. War bond campaigns wanted him on stage. His photograph appeared across America. He accepted those responsibilities because he understood they helped support the war effort. But privately, he disliked being called a hero. Friends later recalled that he always redirected praise toward the Marines who had fought beside him. He insisted no one held that line alone. And he was right. The battle belonged to every exhausted Marine who refused to retreat. Still, Basilone's story was far from over. Despite becoming one of America's best-known war heroes, he repeatedly requested a return to combat. Many senior officers believed he was too valuable as a symbol to risk again. Basilone disagreed. He believed his place remained with the Marines on the front line. Eventually, his request was granted. On February 19, 1945, during the opening assault on Iwo Jima, Basilone once again led Marines under devastating enemy fire. He helped destroy heavily defended Japanese positions and guided a stalled tank through intense combat to support the infantry advance. That same day, John Basilone was killed in action. He was only 28 years old. His courage at Guadalcanal had already secured his place in American military history. His return to combat, despite having every opportunity to remain safely at home, secured something even greater: the lasting respect of the Marines who fought beside him. Today, military historians continue to study the defense of Guadalcanal as one of the turning points of the Pacific War. The island remained in Allied hands. The Japanese offensive failed, and the initiative in the Pacific slowly began shifting toward the United States. Among all the strategic decisions, naval battles, and aerial victories that shaped that campaign, one story continues to stand out. Not because one man defeated an army. History is rarely that simple. But because one Marine refused to let a critical section of the line collapse when it mattered most. Sometimes, history doesn't change because of overwhelming numbers. Sometimes, it changes because one exhausted sergeant picks up another machine gun, loads one more ammunition belt, and decides that this line will not break.